Birthdays were never my favorite days. I wasn't the type to hang banners across the living room, invite 30 people over, or post staged photos online with captions about being 35 and thriving. If anything, I tried to let the day pass unnoticed, slipping by like any other Wednesday or Friday on the calendar. A quiet dinner with my husband, Michael, was more than enough. A slice of chocolate cake from the bakery down the street, maybe a glass of red wine, and his corny jokes about me becoming a mature woman with every passing year. That was the kind of celebration I understood. So when the doorbell rang that afternoon in our neighborhood just outside Denver, Colorado, I didn't expect it to be anything special. Michael had already left the office early so we could spend the evening together, and I thought maybe he had arranged some kind of surprise. But when I opened the door, there wasn't a florist holding a bouquet, no delivery man balancing balloons, not even a neighbor stopping by to offer good wishes. Instead, there was only a plain brown package sitting squarely on the welcome mat. At first glance, it looked like any ordinary delivery, but something about it pulled at me. The box wasn't decorated with wrapping paper or ribbons, the way you'd expect from a birthday gift. It was sealed with cheap tape, the kind that never quite sticks, and the corners were slightly dented as if it had been handled too roughly. My eyes dropped to the label, and that's when my stomach tightened. Fekre. Handwriting was familiar, painfully so. Sharp loops, pressed hard into the paper, as if the person had been trying to leave a permanent mark. It was my mother's handwriting? Happy birthday, I guess, I muttered under my breath, leaning down to pick it up. The box felt heavier than it should have for its size. Michael had followed me into the hallway, and I felt his eyes on me as I brought the package inside. He didn't smile or make some teasing comment about my parents finally remembering to send me something. Instead, his expression was guarded, his shoulders tense. "Don't open it," he said quietly. His voice carried a weight I didn't hear often, the kind that made me pause. I froze halfway through setting it down on the kitchen counter. What? Why not? It's from them. Exactly. He crossed his arms, eyes locked on the box as if it were alive. Something isn't right. I looked back at the package, tracing the uneven tape with my fingertips. Now that I saw it through Michael's eyes, the whole thing looked off. It wasn't just carelessly wrapped. It had been opened and resealed. The cardboard felt flimsy, in spots, as if it had been tampered with. My pulse began to race. I wanted to dismiss it, to laugh it off, to tell him he was being paranoid. But Michael never used that tone unless he was certain of something. His instincts had saved us more than once, and I'd learned the hard way not to ignore them. Still, part of me felt foolish. This was my birthday gift from my parents, not a scene out of a crime show. But another part of me, the part that had grown up navigating their manipulation, felt the familiar warning tug in my chest. I forced a smile, masking the unease rising in me. "Fine," I said, trying to sound casual. "I won't open it, but I'm going to call them." Michael didn't argue. He just stood there, watchful, as I grabbed my phone from the counter and dialed my parents' number. I pressed the record button before the call connected, a habit I had picked up years ago when I realized words had a way of twisting in my family. My mother answered on the third ring. "Sweetheart," she sang, her voice syrupy sweet in that way she used whenever she was trying too hard. "Did you get it?" "Yes," I said, keeping my tone light. "Thank you for the gift. It was unexpected." I let the lie hang in the air, careful not to say I had opened it. There was the slightest pause on the other end, then a sharp exhale that sounded almost like relief. "Oh, good," she replied quickly. "We just knew you'd make the most of it." Her words struck me as odd. Make the most of it. That wasn't something you said about a sweater or a perfume set. And the way she rushed through it, as if she had been holding her breath until she believed I had done what she wanted, it made my chest tighten. I ended the call as soon as I could, forcing a cheerful goodbye before hanging up. My hand shook, slightly as I set the phone down. Michael was still staring at me, his jaw tight. "What did she say?" he asked. "That I'd make the most of it," I replied, repeating the phrase with a grimace. Does that sound normal to you? He shook his head. Not even close. I replayed the call in my mind, each word landing heavier than the last. My mother's voice had carried something strange, almost desperate. And though I wanted to believe it was just my paranoia talking, I couldn't shake the sense that the package on our counter wasn't a gift at all. It was something else. Something I wasn't meant to question. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I couldn't bring myself to leave the package alone, but I couldn't bring myself to open it either. I hovered between fear and curiosity, pacing the living room as Michael worked quietly at the dining table. Every time I caught his eyes, I saw the same message there. Don't touch it. By evening, the house felt different. Shadows seemed sharper, silence heavier. I caught myself glancing at the clock, wondering how long it would take before my parents called back to ask if I liked their gift. Part of me wanted to call them again, to push, to ask outright what they had sent. But another part of me was afraid of the answer. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Colorado sky with streaks of pink and orange, I realized something had shifted inside me. I had always tried to excuse my parents' behavior, to rationalize their favoritism toward my younger brother Daniel, or their cold dismissal of my achievements. But this, sending me a package that even Michael thought looked dangerous, felt like a new kind of betrayal. The box sat on the counter, silent but menacing, like a secret waiting to detonate. I didn't know then what would come of it, only that it was no ordinary birthday gift. And deep down, beneath the fear and confusion, I understood that whatever was inside had the power to change everything. By the time night began to fold itself over Denver, I had almost convinced myself that Michael was being overly cautious. Maybe the tape on the package was sloppy because my parents had reused an old box. Maybe the weight felt strange because it was something practical, like kitchenware or books. I kept circling these flimsy explanations in my mind as if repeating them would make them true. But deep down, my instincts kept whispering otherwise. I was in the kitchen reheating soup when it happened. A loud, urgent knock rattled the front door, sharp enough to make me nearly drop the ladle in my hand. Michael was already standing before I could react. We locked eyes, both of us silent for a heartbeat too long. The knock came again. 3. Quick raps, authoritative. I set the ladle down, wiped my palms against my jeans, and walked toward the door. My chest tightened as I turned the knob, part of me wishing I could pretend not to be home. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch. Their posture was official, their expressions serious, the kind of serious that made my heart drop into my stomach. One of them, a tall man with a square jaw and cropped blonde hair, spoke first. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but firm, "we need to speak with you about a package delivered here today." For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. My breath caught in my throat. They knew. Michael stepped closer to me, his hand brushing mine in a quiet gesture of steadiness. I finally managed to nod and open the door wider. "Of course. Please. Come in." They entered the living room, their eyes scanning the house as though taking in every detail. Michael and I followed them, and I pointed toward the kitchen counter where the box still sat. "That's it," I whispered. The blonde officer exchanged a look with his partner. A woman with dark hair pulled tightly into a bun. She moved toward the package, pulling on a pair of gloves from her jacket pocket before lifting it carefully, setting it back down as if it were made of glass. The blonde officer turned to me. "Did you open it?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "No, I didn't." His eyes flicked to Michael. "She's telling the truth?" Michael nodded firmly. "I told her not to. Something about it felt wrong." The officer's shoulders eased slightly. "That was a smart decision. This package matches several others we've been tracking as part of an ongoing federal investigation. It's important you understand. You may have just been spared a very serious situation." My knees went weak. I gripped the back of the couch to steady myself. "What do you mean, serious situation?" The female officer straightened, her voice measured. "We have reason to believe the package may contain items tied to money laundering and possibly controlled substances. We'll need to take it as evidence." For a second, the world tilted. My parents had sent this on my birthday. My parents had addressed a package tied to an investigation straight to me. My mind spun, scrambling for reasons, explanations, anything that could make sense of it. The officers moved with precision, carefully securing the box into a large evidence bag. The sound of the tape sealing shut seemed final, like the closing of a door I could never reopen. "Ma'am," the blonde officer said again, his tone gentler now, "do you have any idea who would have sent this to you?" I hesitated. Michael gave me a slight nod, a silent urging to tell the truth. "My parents," I admitted finally. "It was from them. My mother even called me earlier to ask if I had opened it." Their eyes sharpened at that. "Do you have proof of the call?" Wordlessly, I pulled out my phone, navigating to the recording. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the quiet room, syrupy and expectant. "Oh, good, sweetheart. We just knew you'd make the most of it." The officers exchanged another look, one I couldn't decipher, but that made my stomach churn. When the recording ended, the female officer leaned forward slightly. "Would you be willing to provide us with a copy of this?" "Yes," I said quickly, handing over the file. My hands trembled as I set the phone back down afterward. They thanked me, then spent the next half hour asking a stream of questions. Had my parents ever sent me packages before? Had they asked me to transfer money on their behalf? Had I ever known them to be involved in anything suspicious? I answered as honestly as I could, my voice wobbling despite my efforts to stay composed. Finally, after what felt like hours, the blonde officer sighed. "There's something you need to know. Your younger brother, Daniel, has been under suspicion for several months now. We've traced irregular bank transfers through accounts in both America and Europe, some of which are tied to your family's address." My entire body went cold. Daniel. Of course. The officer's words blurred in my ears as memories rushed. Forward. Daniel is dropping out of college in Boston. Daniel asked my parents for money to start a business that never existed. Daniel disappears for weeks at a time, only to show up in expensive clothes with flimsy excuses. And my parents, always covering for him, always twisting reality to protect him, while I was left standing on the outside. The officer's voice cut back through my haze. "It's possible your parents were used as intermediaries to protect him. It's also possible they're more deeply involved. Sending the package to you could have been an attempt to shield him by putting you in the line of fire instead." I gripped the couch tighter, the words piercing me like glass. My own family had chosen me as the scapegoat, the expendable one. Michael's hand found mine, his grip steady, grounding me as I fought to hold back tears. "She's not involved," he said firmly, looking directly at the officers. "She's never been involved in anything like this." The female officer nodded. "We believe you. That's why you must continue to cooperate. Tonight, you did exactly the right thing." They left shortly afterward, the evidence bag containing the package tucked carefully in their arms. The door closed behind them, and for a long moment, the house fell silent again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It was heavier, weighted with suspicion and betrayal, and the realization that my birthday gift had never been meant for me at all. That night, I sat on the couch replaying my mother's voice again and again. Every syllable dripped with expectation. Every pause felt like a trap. What once could have been brushed off as paranoia now stood undeniable. For the first time in my life, I saw my family clearly. My brother shielded at any cost, my parents willing to sacrifice me to protect him. And me, always the strong one, always the one expected to endure. But this time, I wasn't sure I could. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I shut my eyes, Daniel's face appeared in my mind. That smug grin he had worn so many times when he walked into a room, knowing my parents had already smoothed the ground for him, making sure his mistakes never truly mattered. It was like he carried a shield made out of their devotion, and I was the one forced to carry the weight of responsibility instead. When Daniel failed out of college in Boston, my parents had spun the story like it was a blessing. "He's too creative for classrooms," they told relatives at Thanksgiving, smiling like proud parents. Meanwhile, when I worked 2 jobs to save for my first townhouse in Denver, they told me I was boring, too practical, too afraid of risk. I never forgot the sting of those words. Their golden child burned through $50,000 of their savings on bad investments and reckless spending, and they called it a learning experience. I bought a modest home on my own, and they mocked me for being small-minded. Dawn broke, painting the sky a pale gray over the Rockies. I sat at the kitchen table with Michael, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. Neither of us had spoken much since the officers left. The weight of what had happened pressed down between us like another presence in the room. By mid-morning, the investigators returned. They sat across from us, their notebooks out, their expressions patient but probing. The blonde officer leaned forward slightly. "Did you know about your brother's activities, ma'am?" I shook my head firmly. "No. The only thing I've ever known is that my parents treat him as if he's untouchable. Every mistake he's made, every dollar he's squandered. They've shielded him. Always." The female officer scribbled something down. The blonde one exhaled through his nose, almost like he had expected my answer. They asked a few more questions, and I answered truthfully, though each word left me hollow. When they finally left, I felt both drained and restless, like I was unraveling thread by thread. That afternoon, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I called my parents. The moment the screen lit up and their faces appeared, I knew what I had to say. "You sent me that package to save him, didn't you?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "You thought if anyone could take the fall, it'd be me." For once, they didn't rush to deny it. My father leaned back in his chair, his face as composed as if I'd asked about the weather. "You're strong, Anna," he said, his tone calm, almost patronizing. "You can handle setbacks. Daniel can't." The words hit me harder than I could have imagined. They weren't even trying to hide it. They truly believed my life was disposable, that I was the buffer between their precious son and the consequences of his choices. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last. I laughed bitterly, though there was no humor in it. "So that's what I am to you? The strong one? The one you can sacrifice?" My mother tried to interject, her voice honeyed as always. "Sweetheart, you're misunderstanding. Families have to make hard decisions sometimes. We knew you'd come through this. Daniel is fragile. Fragile." That word echoed in my ears like a curse. Daniel wasn't fragile. He was selfish, reckless, and entitled, and they had raised him to believe the world would bend for him. Michael, sitting beside me, placed a steady hand on my shoulder. His touch was grounding, but his face showed the same fury I felt building. Inside. "Do you hear yourselves?" he said, leaning slightly toward the screen. "You're admitting you tried to set her up. You were willing to put her freedom at risk so your son could walk away clean." My parents looked uncomfortable at that, but not guilty, not remorseful. My father rubbed his temple, as if we were children whining about unfairness rather than adults confronting betrayal. "Anna," he said, his voice firm, "you've always been resilient. We counted on that. Daniel, he's different. He wouldn't survive prison, or an investigation, or even the scrutiny. You, on the other hand, have Michael, a stable home, and a career. You'd be fine. We did what we had to do." Their words gutted me. Every memory of being overlooked, every small cruelty, every moment when I had swallowed disappointment just to keep the peace. It all came rushing back in one tidal wave of clarity. They had never seen me as a daughter to cherish. I was their insurance policy, their safeguard, their expendable choice. I sat in silence for a moment, staring at the people who had raised me, who had taught me to say please and thank you, who had once held my hand when I scraped my knee. Now they looked more like strangers than family. "You've used me my whole life," I whispered finally. "And I let you. But this is the last time." My mother opened her mouth, but I ended the call before she could say another word. The silence in the living room was deafening. Michael's hand tightened around mine. "You did the right thing," he murmured. But the right thing didn't feel like relief. It felt like grief. like mourning something that had never really existed. I realized, sitting there, that I had spent years trying to win their approval, twisting myself into shapes they would never recognize. And all along, they had already decided my role. I was the strong one, the one who could bear the blows, the one who didn't need protection, the one they could sacrifice if it meant saving Daniel. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet suburban street, the neat lawns, the cars parked in driveways. It all looked so normal, so peaceful, but inside me a storm raged. I remembered birthdays when Daniel got lavish gifts, an expensive guitar, a trip to Europe, while I received little more than a card. I remembered the time he crashed my father's car in high school, and they laughed it off. But when I dented a fender years later, they lectured me for an hour about responsibility. I remembered the way my mother used to say, "Be patient with him, Anna. He's not as strong as you." The words had always sounded like flattery, but now I saw them for what they were. A warning. I was the shield, and Daniel was the sword they polished endlessly, even as he cut everything around him. By the time the sun began to set again, I felt something inside me shift permanently. A thread had snapped. The bond between us wasn't just frayed, it was broken. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to excuse them, wasn't trying to find some hidden love beneath their favoritism. I was seeing them, and the clarity burned. The weeks that followed felt like living in a haze, every day both sharp with tension and dull with waiting. Each phone call made my stomach clench, and each unexpected knock on the door made my heart pound. I didn't know when the final reckoning would come, only that it was on its way. It came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, pretending to answer work emails when my phone buzzed with a call from one of the investigators. I answered with a shaky hello, bracing myself. "It's official," the officer said. "Your brother, Daniel, has been taken into custody. We have enough evidence to move forward with charges: money laundering, fraud, and obstruction. The total amount tied to him is just under $2 million. It's serious." For a moment, the words didn't feel real. $2 million. My little brother, the boy my parents had once sworn could do no wrong, was now facing a future inside a prison cell. The officer went on, "Your parents are attempting to claim ignorance, but given the package and the recording you provided, the case against them looks substantial as well. They won't walk away from this untouched." I thanked him quietly, hung up the phone, and sat in silence. Michael came over, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. "What happened?" he asked. I looked up at him, my eyes stinging, though no tears had fallen yet. "Daniel's been arrested, and my parents, they're tangled up in it too." He didn't look surprised. If anything, his expression was one of quiet certainty. "You knew this was coming," he said softly. "You've known all along." I nodded, though part of me still wanted to deny it. Part of me wanted to cling to the fantasy that my parents had only been careless, only misguided. But the truth was clearer now than it had ever been. They had deliberately chosen me as the shield. They had tried to make me the one to bear the consequences so Daniel could remain their golden child. The following days were filled with calls from lawyers, investigators, and distant relatives who suddenly wanted to know what happened. Each time I felt like I was repeating the same story: the package, the recording, the betrayal. Each retelling chipped away at whatever thin thread still connected me to my family. When my parents finally called me, their voices were full of desperation, not love. "You have to help us, Anna," my mother pleaded over the phone. "You know we didn't mean for it to come to this. Families stick together." I laughed bitterly, though my voice shook. Families don't send each other evidence of crimes and hope the other one takes the fall. Families don't gamble away one child's freedom to protect the other. There was silence. Then my father's voice cut in, colder than ever. "You're overreacting. We only did what was necessary." That was the last straw. I hung up without another word. From that moment forward, I made a choice. I blocked their numbers, ignored every email, and shut the door on the toxic cycle I had been trapped in for decades. The weight on my chest lightened almost immediately. It wasn't that the pain vanished. It was still there, raw and sharp, but it no longer had the power to control me. On the evening of my 35th birthday, instead of sitting at some restaurant pretending everything was fine, I sat in the living room of my Denver home with Michael. The fire crackled in the fireplace, filling the space with warmth. 2 glasses of wine sat between us on the coffee table. For the first time, the day felt like mine and mine alone. I should feel sad, I whispered, staring into the flames. Sad that my family is in ruins, sad that my brother is behind bars, sad that my parents chose him over me again and again. I paused, my throat tight. But I don't. I feel lighter, Michael smiled softly, his eyes kind. That's because you finally cut the cord? You've been carrying them for too long. I leaned into him, letting his words settle into me. He was right. For so long, I had been weighed down by expectations, by guilt, by the endless hunger for their approval. Letting go wasn't easy, but it was necessary. It was survival. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild in small ways. I redecorated the house, nothing drastic, just small touches that made the space feel more mine. A new set of curtains in the dining room, a painting I had always loved but never bought because my mother would have called it gaudy. I bought it anyway, and every time I walked past it, I smiled. I also started therapy, something I had put off for years because I didn't think my pain was serious enough. Sitting across from a professional, hearing her say that what I had endured was real, that I wasn't imagining the neglect and betrayal, it was like breathing fresh air after being underwater too long. Through it all, Michael stayed by my side. He reminded me that family isn't always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you choose, the people who stand beside you when everyone else has tried to tear you down. The package, the so-called gift, had been meant to destroy me. But in the end, it had become something else entirely. It was the final breaking point, the moment that forced me to open my eyes and step away from a family that had never truly loved me the way I deserved. My parents lost their golden child to prison, and in doing so, they revealed just how far they were willing to go to protect him. I lost the illusion that blood automatically meant loyalty. But in its place, I found something far more valuable: peace. Now, when I think of family, I think of Michael. I think of the friends who called to check on me, who showed up with casseroles and bottles of wine, who listened without judgment. I think of the quiet mornings when I wake up and realize the air feels lighter, freer, unburdened. The box is gone, locked away as evidence somewhere in a federal building. But the scars it left behind remain. They're not marks I hide from, though. They're proof of survival, of strength, of the decision I made to choose myself at last. As I sit here now penning these words, I realize my story isn't about betrayal as much as it is about liberation. What began with a package on my doorstep became the ending of one life and the beginning of another, and for the first time in my 35 years, I am finally, truly free.